So this project is an infrastructure project. I'm working on 2 new boxes, and I want to try and do miter corners on the top and bottom edges. And rather than playing with the table saw and tilting it, and well, actually tilting it this way, which a lot of people have done, since that's set to square, I know it adjusts, but rather than that, and since I've needed something like this, I went and made a miter shooting board kind of thing. And what I did was I used the piece that I got from I got the miter gauge that I got from the sawstop, since that was just sitting in the drawer. And it's not actually attached or bolted, there's just a wooden peg in an existing hole. And then these are friction fit. And there were 2 holes here in the frame, so I took pieces of round rod that came out of printers, because who doesn't need fancy random bits of round stock, and those were slightly too big, so I drilled this out and made holes that lined up, and you can see that's at 45, so this way I can do a 45-degree angle. And all I had to do was put a piece of board, which that's just a piece of scrap, on there, and I used this kind of material just because it's smooth. I'm not sure if that's a good idea, because yeah, we'll find out over time if that's a good idea or not, but wax on it makes it turn all dark, probably, at least with the plane. Anyway, it looks like it works, because I have a frame here, and it is pretty much square, and of course it'll do a little bit better once it's glued in and such, but overall the edges aren't bad. So I did all the cuts using the miter box and the miter saw, and that's the top that goes on there. So there's the bottom. So the bottom is going to extend in slightly, and then the bottom inside piece is going to sit down on that, I think, similar to one of the previous boxes I did. And then the top is going to slide down over the outside. One thing I need to remember to do is properly, because when I had cut up this stock to make all the edges, I figured out that I should have just enough for top and bottom of both boxes. Well, I had enough for the bottom of the box, and the bottom of the box, and the top of the bigger box, and half the smaller box. And the reason is there were pieces that would have been plenty long for 2 of those, but I didn't count, or I didn't properly cut in the proper order. So this messed me up one other time on another project. The carving bench, actually. I had to merge 2 pieces of the side together because I just barely cut wrong. Yes, that's similar to this. So I have another piece of extra stuff gluing up that I can cut the final 2 sides out. But this worked, and it took a while. Partly because I built that today and was fine-tuning things and tweaking stuff. And this number 62 plane, you can see there's the skid marks on it from running along the white edge. Even with wax, it shined it nice in spots that were higher or lower. Probably higher. And the problem with this is you have to keep sharpening the blade, because I'm working on oak and cutting. It did nice. Let's see. Will it focus on that? Yes. So it did a good job on it. It shines it up nice. And, makes it smooth and all that. But since it's end grain on oak, that's hard on the plane, so you have to keep sharpening it, which I'm not an expert at plane sharpening. I managed to get it sharpened twice and got most of the way through this. But I also then figured out, okay, if I'm going to do that, because the one reason you do this like this is on the bottom of the plane there's these side bits, so the side bit won't cut into your bottom piece, and as long as this bottom piece is straight, it'll help you keep a straight edge for doing your angles and such. So I have a sanding block. Well, the sanding block is just a belt sander belt on the block, and I scooted the belt off to the side, so then similarly I can run it along there, and that way it doesn't mess up the edge and constantly make a weird bit. And the benefit of this is it doesn't need sharpening. So is it perfect? No. Does it work? Yes. And previously when I did the miter corners on one of the other boxes that I did, I actually used a hand file and filed these on four pieces, so 8 corners. That was horrible. This, even using the sanding piece, is not bad because I cut it to there, and this actually, because it's a rough grit, takes it down fairly quickly, even if you leave, a gap. So yeah, I like it. I think this is going to be very helpful, and the fact that I can use it with the plane or the sanding block is a good thing. And the other benefit of this method is, because this isn't, I didn't damage this in any way, I didn't drill any extra holes or anything else. Well, okay, I made those holes slightly bigger, but I'm not sure what those holes were for anyway. Nothing that comes default with it attaches there. This actually will lift up out, and I can just take this block off because there's just screws holding it on, or bolts. These are bolts with flat heads, actually. So I just used the threads to make threads in the wood, and it's just held on like that. So I didn't mess this up, and because it's something like this, I can switch it to 90, I can switch it to 30, I can pick any of these other angles, and as long as I get it such that it holds sturdy, I have a fully adjustable angle sanding block. And with the pin idea, that holds it super solid. Like me pulling, the bench slightly moves before this does, just with the 2 clamps. So it was very stable. I probably will have to redo this block because with playing around, this doesn't get, like, this tilts back in too far, so there's a little bit of, not tear out, but fluff at the end with the oak. Kind of like that with the saw, just a little bit of fluff. So it's not really tear out so much as just extra fluff hanging off the edge. It's easy enough to clean up, but for fine things I may have to change that. But it's easy, it's just 2 bolts. So yeah, that was today's project, was getting this far with these corners for the other two boxes that I'm working on, and making that. I figured out the plan the other day, but I put it all together this morning and it worked. I like it. And I really like the fact that it works with sanding blocks or planes, because like I said, you don't have to sharpen the sanding block because the belts, and if you want different grits, that you just get a different grit belt, and then you can go real fine or rough. So that was the project for today, and I like it. It was very successful.